In my most recent video, I went over the basic game mechanics of Gen 2 Pokemon. I went over where you can play competitive Gen 2, and how you could learn it. In today's video, I will be answering why you should play competitive GSC. Here's the short answer: it's awesome! The second generation of competitive Pokemon is, despite what you may have heard, a solid, fun, and rewarding competitive outlet. I'm making this video both to explain why it's awesome and to combat misinformation. GSC is both the lowest played and least popular gen of Pokemon. This is, in part, because of harmful stereotypes that have been spread over the years. Stereotypes that have either been overblown, or in some cases, just made up. That is a shame, because there's a lot to like about competitive GSC. Its mechanics and gameplay give it a very unique identity. It contains elements present in more modern generations, while retaining some of Gen 1's quirkiness. It's a gen with far more meat and depth than its primitive nature may suggest. GSC is a difficult generation to learn, but it's also very rewarding. GSC is not everyone's cup of tea, but it is a generation that deserves respect. To be clear, throughout most of this video, I will be talking about things in a GSC OU context. OU is the most popular GSC tier, and the one most people will be drawn to. Do keep in mind though, that much of what I say also applies to GSC UU, GSC NU, and GSC Ubers. With that all out of the way, I must answer the million-dollar question. Is GSC the generation of stall? No, it's not. The perception that GSC is all stall isn't nearly as common nowadays. It's an easy misconception to prove false. If we look at GSC tiers, offensive teams are just as, if not more popular than defensive ones. The generation is plenty offensive. If you use passive teams, or you just play passively, you will be punished for it. The mechanics of GSC don't just benefit defensive mons. The stat experience system helps offensive Pokemon too. Defensively, their higher bulk gives them more opportunities to switch in. Offensively, mixed attacking is more potent because you can use maxed out attack, special attack, and speed all at once. You cannot do that in later generations. In addition, Explosion and Self-Destruct, they halve the defense of the opponent when used. Their setup moves, like Curse, Swords Dance, Growth, and Belly Drum. There's some Pokemon who can wall break through sheer strength. There's the move Thief, which allows you to steal the omnipresent leftovers. Finally, there is a little move known as Spikes. Spikes play an integral role in GSC tiers. They help make damage actually stick, something difficult to achieve when leftovers are on every Pokemon. Spikes greatly increase the power of offensive Pokemon, and they let defensive Pokemon wear down their checks. They can sometimes be all you need to break down a team. Double switching with Spike Sub is a tried and true way of putting yourself in a good position. It lets you keep up momentum. So yeah, the generation is plenty offensive. The conception that GSC is all stall, it just doesn't hold up at all. With that being said though, it is fair to say that GSC is slower than other generations. Here is a list detailing the average and median turn counts of different generation games. Games played for the Smogon Premier League. As we can see, GSC does have the average highest turn count. GSC SPL games took, on average, 114 turns. This slower pace is the result of three main factors: the stat experience system, rest plus sleep talk mechanics, and the omnipresence of leftovers. It's uncommon to see a Pokemon get two-shot unless they are hit by stab super effective attacks or boosted ones. If sleep talk pulls rest in GSC, rest will work like it normally does. This makes rest talk much better in Gen 2, and every relevant Pokemon just so happens to learn both rest and sleep talk. As a result, even games with two offensive teams, they can go on for a while. Offensively minded Pokemon can be durable and have longevity. Defensively minded Pokemon can be extremely durable, especially when paired with the right teammates. Let's take a step back though. While GSC is certainly slower than other generations, it isn't overwhelmingly slow. 114 turn games, on average, is far from unbearable, you guys. It's also not like 100 turn games or more is a guarantee. Many of the games you play will be under 100, some will be under 50. The length of a game is also something you partially control. Not only does the team you use play a part, but also how good you play. I've seen many games artificially extended because someone misplayed or used a bad team. Sometimes it was both. GSC is not a gen where you will consistently run into these mega long games. They will make up a small fraction of the games you play. Are slower games even a bad thing? Not necessarily, no. Long games can be just as rewarding and enjoyable as fast-paced ones. It can feel extra good when you win a hard-fought, long victory. It can be enjoyable playing at a slower pace. You have more time to figure out and execute a game plan. Personally, I feel like hacks is less of a big deal in slower games. It feels like you have more opportunities to rebound from it. Why should turn count be the deciding factor anyway? Why not look at what goes on in those turns? What actually goes on in a GSC game? Now this point I'll expand way more on later, but for now I'll say this. GSC is not people playing passively, spamming recovery moves and constantly switching out. It is a dynamic generation, one that contains all the stuff you do in other generations. There's prediction, there's managing the opponent's threats while making use of your team's Pokemon and strategies. There's hacks management, turns where you need to make tough choices and sacrifices. There's figuring out a game plan, figuring out which one of your Pokemon can win the game, and how they can do that. GSC is not an alien planet. At the end of the day, it's still Pokemon, and many of the skills you need in later generations, they'll still carry you in GSC. There are some skills you need if you want to play GSC though. You can't play GSC exactly like how you play later gens. Because GSC is slower, you obviously need to be patient. You need to be able to focus in those longer games, because you will run into long games. If you stop focusing, even for a few turns, you may be punished severely. In long games, one turn of mistake can lead to dozens of turns of pain. If you lose the wrong Pokemon, it can cause a domino effect, an effect that cannot be made up from. Frankly, I think GSC is more of a gen where KOs are harder to come by, rather than just the slower generation. Unless you play incredibly aggressive, something that can backfire, it's harder to dismantle teams. You need to work harder for your KOs, and you need patience to do so. You need to get those KOs without losing too much ground yourself. Crazy high damage moves don't really exist in GSC beyond Explosion, and that's a move with big drawbacks. There's also less passive damage, Stealth Rock doesn't exist, and spikes can only go up to one layer. Toxic, while a great move in Gen 2, has to deal with rest being so common. It also reverts to regular poison when you switch out. All of what I mentioned is a part of something greater. It all lets me transition into my largest point of praise towards competitive GSC. The thing that keeps me playing this generation over all the other ones. GSC is the most pure Pokemon experience. It is the generation where your skill in game shines brightest. In GSC, you cannot rely on Stealth Rock, U-turn, Volt Switch, Permanent Sand, or anything like that. In GSC, your understanding of the game state, ability to effectively use your Pokemon, and ability to find a win path play the largest role. You have to create your own opportunities in GSC. Opportunities to win the game don't just come to you. For the most part, your only considerations are the 6 Pokemon you use and what movesets you give them. The lack of an EV system simplifies things significantly. That alone makes GSC more straightforward to learn. You can jump in without having to learn all that. Another big subject to discuss in GSC is team matchups. Team matchups are far less volatile and decisive in GSC tiers. With only 251 Pokemon, GSC is naturally a smaller generation. This, combined with GSC's mechanics, leads to GSC tiers being more centralized, especially in regards to OU and Ubers. It's well known that Snorlax is the supreme king of GSC. It's such a powerful and useful Pokemon that almost no team goes without it. In most tournaments, Snorlax has 100% usage. If you watch GSC games, it can seem like every team is similar. In addition, the Pokemon all seem to be using the same 1 or 2 movesets. You might have to ask what the fun in that is. Fighting the same Pokemon over and over with very little variety. Well, there's quite a lot to like about it. Having a metagame with dozens of viable options is cool and all, but then you have to try account for all of those threats when building a team. It's far more likely that your team will run into something you couldn't account for, and now it's just over. In metagames like that, the simple matchup that two teams have against one another can swing the entire game. On the contrary, a centralized metagame like, say, GSCOU has more order in it. With less Pokemon to account for, it's easier to build teams capable of taking on every relevant threat. The Pokemon available play a big role in making that possible. Snorlax is a great thing for GSCOU to have. It's a Pokemon powerful both offensively and defensively. It's a Pokemon able to soft check a wide variety of threats. It's never a perfect counter, but it can generally be a lot of stuff. This leads to skill-based gameplay. Pokemon like Zapdos are checked by Snorlax, but they aren't countered. If you play and position yourself right, you can break Snorlax with Zapdos. In GSC, it's much harder for you to justify going, well, I lose to XYZ threat, but I don't think it's gonna show up, unless that threat is something niche. If your team is sound, you can reasonably account for almost everything in the metagame, or at the very least, have a plan to outplay things. It's much harder to surprise the opponent with cool new movesets or Pokemon. Because there's no EV spreads, you know how fast every Pokemon is. You know how much damage their attacks are going to do. Much less of your brain power is spent wondering what could happen, and more what you can do to win the game. Because you run into the same Pokemon so often, it's easier for you to learn how those Pokemon work. You can learn how they, in practice, match up against other Pokemon. My main point is this: a GSC game between two sound teams should very rarely, if ever, be decided off matchup. Some matchups will be harder than others, but it should not be unbeatable. That is the main benefit of a more centralized metagame. It's another reason GSC is the most player-dependent generation. You have to uncover what the opponent is using your knowledge of the metagame. Also, like, GSCOU, it really is not that exclusive of a metagame. GSCOU has 26 total Pokemon, and there's more beyond that. Several UUBL Pokemon, like Tentacruel, Espeon, Charizard, and Moltres, are serious contenders in the OU metagame. Even some Pokemon in UU and below are viable options, like Quagsire. Either way, I do not think the amount of viable Pokemon should determine a tier's quality. The way those Pokemon play against each other and how competitive the resulting tier is, that should be the main focus. Another misconception I've seen is the idea that GSC is a dead generation. It's a stagnant generation that looks the exact same every year. There's only a few good, competent players. This is not true on either count, at least not in the context of GSCOU. While GSCOU is, statistically, the least played generation, it has enough competent players. This year alone has seen several new contenders pop up in OU. The quality of the player base is another major factor. GSC player pools in tournaments can be stacked. filled with several top players. The idea that GSCOU has no players is just kinda ignorant. Secondly, the GSCOU metagame is still developing, 26 years after Gen 2 was released. Developments in GSC just tend to be more subtle. It's very rarely about a flashy new lower tier Pokemon finding a niche. At this point, we have a pretty good idea of who is worth using in GSCOU. The viability of those Pokemon is what may change. A previously underexplored or niche Pokemon may become more popular as players find a new way to use it. The same can happen in reverse. A previous staple of the metagame may fall out of favor. Players may realize the potential a certain moveset has and start using it again. Players will experiment. They'll experiment with different movesets and Pokemon on specific team structures. Every year, the same Pokemon do still show up, but the way they get used, or how common they may be, that is gonna be changing. As I have alluded to, GSC is a very skill-intensive generation. I've brought up a bit of why this is the case. Team matchups matter less. You need to focus for long periods of time. You have to make your own opportunities. All that stuff. That is just a part of it. The way GSC is played demands a lot from the person playing it. Yeah, you can go a bit slower, but that does not mean you can go on autopilot. In GSC, you must be able to look forward. You need to be able to think several turns ahead, planning out a path to victory, or how you might deal with a threat. Learning how to position yourself is a key skill in GSC. You don't have Volt Switch, U-turn, eject button, or anything like that. It's up to you to position yourself. You could have a Pokemon that messes up your opponent, but if you can't position it right, it won't do anything. Double switches are a classic way of putting yourself in a good spot, especially with spikes up. Double switching also keeps up momentum, another thing you need to succeed in GSC. You need to keep pressure on your opponent. You cannot give them free turns. If you spend too much time using recovery moves, you'll sap that momentum and give the opponent an advantage. This is another reason why offense succeeds in GSC. Offensive teams tend to be the best at keeping up momentum, especially against defensive teams. Another skill-intensive element present in GSC is the move Explosion. Explosion is the most powerful move in GSC. It deals huge amounts of damage, being the one move in GSC that frequently lands one-hit KOs. However, the move comes with a lot of downsides. It also KOs your Pokemon. Use Explosion with a Pokemon you need defensively and you risk losing the game. Explosion can also be neutralized. Rock and Steel types, while they still take a lot from it, can stomach Explosion. Ghost types, they take 0 damage. Thus, learning how to use Explosion is an important skill. You need to recognize if the exploding Pokemon is needed defensively. You need to recognize who your Explosion targets are. What opposing Pokemon do you really want gone? You need to predict right, and not boom into Rock, Ghost, or Steel types. In OU and Ubers especially, it's frequently your best means of breaking teams. There are offensive teams built around Explosion. These teams pair multiple Explosion users alongside sweepers who can abuse weakened teams. Another skill to address in GSC is team building. As I've gone over, GSC tiers are more limited, both in terms of Pokemon and movesets. Despite this, team building is intricate, and it's something you'll want to learn as you play GSC. You want a team that makes use of the talents of the tier's Pokemon, while accounting for those talents yourself. The playing field remains quite different though. While this does depend on what GSC tier you play, some of your team slots will be decided before you even build the team. For example, in OU, you are almost always using Snorlax, unless you decide to experiment. You're almost always using a Pokemon with spikes, of which there are only 3 viable options. You are always using Pokemon that can check, say, Snorlax. This checklist form of team building is common in GSC tiers. There are just some Pokemon or roles that every single team needs. In spite of this though, GSC team building is not monotonous. Oftentimes, there are several Pokemon that can fulfill a necessary role. GSC OU has several normal resistant Pokemon with a phasing move. GSC UU has several Pokemon that can serve as a check to Nidoqueen. Choosing what Pokemon you want to fulfill a specific role comes down to the team you are ultimately making. In general, GSC teams can be categorized into two fronts: offensive and defensive. Within these categories are your standard, more moderate forms of offense and defense. Offensive and defensive teams can also come in more extreme forms. There are some super fast-paced offensive teams, and some incredibly tanky and passive stall ones. Team building in GSC rewards skill and creativity. There is skill in figuring out how to effectively use your Pokemon, in particular offensive ones. Some GSC Pokemon, like OU Marowak or UU Scyther, are major offensive threats, but their lack of defensive utility make it hard to justify using them. That's 1/6 of your team with little to show defensively. If you build smart though, you can find ways to make up for this lack of utility with your other Pokemon. You can then make use of these terrifying sweepers. Stuff like this is all over GSC. Snorlax on offensive teams is often forced into using rest plus sleep talk sets. These teams need the security against threats like Jinx. Pair Snorlax with a Pokemon like Raikou though, and it's not as necessary defensively. This means you can make use of a more destructive Snorlax set, like Curse plus Earthquake. GSC teams should be made with a goal in mind. You cannot rely on one Pokemon. Your team needs to have synergy. Think about how your Pokemon support each other. What can these partnerships help you do? This could be something simple, pairing Light Screen and Reflect users with setup sweepers, making it easier for those sweepers to set up. It can be more subtle and nuanced, the way a certain duo or even trio of Pokemon match up against the metagame. While doing this, you need to remain prepared for the metagame's threats. Like many of the skills I've gone over today, team building is a skill that comes to you as you play. Do not try making your own teams when you first play a metagame. Start to understand it first. Then, you can go out there and build your own Pokemon teams. One of the last points I'd like to mention is that GSC's mechanics do a lot to balance things out. GSC teams, between stat experience, leftovers, rest talk, and other recovery moves, have a greater backbone. This makes things less volatile, and it helps defend teams from bad luck. You have more room and recovery to rebound from poor RNG. Hazards are more balanced. All you have is one layer of spikes, 12.5% at most. Rest plus sleep talk is a good thing for GSC to have. It helps keep a lot of things in check. If it wasn't for rest talk, status conditions, in particular sleep, would be far worse to deal with. Teams would have less of a backbone, and offensive Pokemon would run wild. Games would become far less interesting, more mindless, and more volatile. GSC's appeal and identity is its balanced, slow-paced, and simple approach to Pokemon. You can't just plow through teams with super strong moves. That is a good thing. You can't nearly as easily surprise the opponent with random moves, Pokemon, or EV spreads. That is a good thing. The most important thing you can do in GSC is outplay your opponent, using the tools at your disposal. Play better than your opponent and respond to their strategies as best as you can. There's one final skill that I'd like to cover in this video. This skill brings me face to face with a major criticism of GSC. A criticism that's become far more prevalent in the 2020s. Pokemon is a game with a lot of RNG in it. Critical hits, moves missing, damage rolls, you name it. In recent years, GSC has been criticized for an overabundance of RNG, for having more RNG than later generations. This mainly comes from the moves used in GSC. In GSC, Thunder is frequently used over Thunderbolt. With how bulky GSC is, you often need the higher base power move. Thunder is a move frequently used in GSC, and it's one with just 70% accuracy. In addition, Rest plus Sleep Talk is common in GSC. You cannot control what move Sleep Talk will select. In OU, Dynamic Punch is a part of the metagame, being used by Tyranitar and most infamously Gengar. Dynamic Punch and Thunder also have secondary effects. It's not just moves too. Critical hits are not only more common in GSC, having a 1 in 15 chance of happening, but they also double the damage that a move would normally do. Freeze is also more volatile. Your thought chance is a mere 10%. Throw all of this on top of the usual Pokemon RNG, and suddenly GSC might seem like a slot machine. The dice rolls are even coin flip generation, if you will. Guys, I get it. Hacks in GSC can be very frustrating. You will lose games to bad RNG, no matter how good you play. Guess what though? You will lose games to RNG in every tier, in every generation. Hacks and RNG is by zero means a GSC exclusive problem. I know some of you might think that's a cop-out, but for one, let me finish, and for two, I kinda agree with you. I think, reasonably, you can say some metagames have more RNG elements than others. I just wanted to emphasize that GSC's hacks problem, quote-unquote, is no different than other generations. I now want to emphasize the following. GSC is not a hacks-dominated generation. Saying as much ignores a lot of nuance and context. Hacks management is a very important skill in GSC. If you over-rely on moves like Thunder or Sleep Talk, you are making yourself more hacks vulnerable. You should be looking at ways to mitigate hacks. Think about how you can win an endgame without having to use Thunder as much, or even use it at all. You know how they say play around the crit in all those Nuzlocke videos? Do the same in GSC. Avoid getting into positions where you need to risk a lot of hacks. Avoid getting into positions where hacks, even in small amounts, can destroy your game plan. With Rest Talk, you don't always have to use Sleep Talk when asleep. You can just burn through the sleep turns to avoid resetting the sleep counter. You can also burn sleep turns if your Pokemon has an opportunity to do so, against something that can't really threaten them much. This lets you wake up earlier, free of potential Sleep Talk RNG. We are also ignoring the fact that GSC, with its slower pace, is a gen where hacks can be less volatile. In GSC's slower environment, you have more of an opportunity to make up for the hacks. Teams have a larger backbone in this generation. 1 or 2 pieces of hacks is very rarely impossible to come back from. Thunder and Rest Talk are not required to play GSC. Many of the Pokemon who use Thunder can use Thunderbolt instead. It's the same deal with Flamethrower over Fire Blast, and nobody is using Blizzard over Ice Beam. Not every Pokemon is using Rest plus Sleep Talk. Many Pokemon use less RNG dependent recovery moves, like Recover or Rest on its own. Many Pokemon forego recovery moves altogether. They rely solely on leftovers for recovery. GSC is not overwhelmingly dominated by RNG elements. Many prominent moves, many prominent interactions can be guaranteed. Hacks and RNG is not something out of your control. You can manage it with smart play and positioning. Do not let hacks tilt you. If you get hacked and then annoyed as a result, it will cloud your vision. Keep your focus and keep looking for ways to win. Do not forget about hacks too. When you formulate a game plan, consider RNG elements. Consider what you can do after if you do get hacked. You can't always turn around and blame hacks if you lose a game. You have to look at what you did as well, what risks you took and how you responded to your opponent. If GSC is a coin flip, why is it always the same people doing the best in tournaments? How would people be playing consistently if this was the case? How come some of competitive Pokemon's greatest achievements, no matter the generation, come from GSC? It's because GSC is not a slot machine. It is a beautiful, balanced, skill-intensive, and highly competitive generation. It is a metagame where the better player wins most of the time. It's a metagame where your play, your basic understanding of Pokemon matches shines the absolute brightest. Why are GSC's flaws so overblown about, and not its numerous positives as a competitive generation? You, personally, may not enjoy GSC, but that does not mean it's a bad tier. In GSC's case, it does a whole lot well, as I have gone over today. Also, as I've gone over today, many of its most popular points of criticism don't hold up very well. GSC is not perfect, but is it quality? Is it a good competitive experience? I would say yes. I've said much of what I wanted to say today. Before signing off, I'd like to give some closing statements. I've enjoyed competitive GSC for almost 6 years now. I've always wanted to see more people try it out. That's why I even started making GSC videos. I truly believe there's a lot to like about GSC. Whether it's the pace, how simple yet sophisticated the gen is, its mechanics, and how much skill is involved. I really do get a kick out of this competitive generation. I've laid out why I think GSC is so cool. I've laid out the skills I think you need to succeed in GSC. My advice, if you do go out there and play GSC, is to just keep practicing. The skills you need to succeed in GSC are things that naturally come to you as you play. They will come to you as you lose games. You will learn from your mistakes and improve in the future. If you want good GSC teams, go and look for them on the Smogon forums, or even copy them from replays. For many of you, GSC will be a different kind of Pokemon. That is okay. It's good to try new things out. It's good to challenge yourself. GSC tiers are not hard to learn the basics of. Anyone can pick up a team, learn which Pokemon are the best and why, learn the basics of how teams are built, and go on their merry way. The challenge in GSC is mastering your gameplay. GSC is easy to learn, difficult to master. It is, as I've said multiple times now, the generation where your in-game skill shines the absolute brightest. Go out there and try out GSC. Go out there and find people in the GSC Discord, or go join tournaments. Do not make your experience with GSC be the damn ladder. The ladder is crap, and it does not represent what GSC is. If one GSC tier isn't your thing, go and try another one. GSC Ubers, UU, NU, they all offer a fresh new experience. In the case of these tiers, the competition isn't as steep. It's easier to break into these tiers, and the tournaments, they tend to be more chilled out. The GSC community is a nice place. You'll have fun talking with the people there. There are some more lighthearted things to like about GSC, like the sprites. The sprites have a lot of charm, and they look really good. The colours on them are superb. Whether you intend to play GSC or not, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I wish you luck with whatever you decide to do. If you do decide to go out there and play GSC, I hope to see you around on the battlefield.